Curiosity Highway. This is part 2 of Darwood Smith, professionally known as Darwood Kaye, Waldo from the Arrow Gang Little Rascals series. In today's video we're going to be interviewing Darwood's son David about his father's life from becoming a child star to an Adventist minister. So I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be a good one. And here's his book his son wrote called Finding Waldo.
Oh look, there's Waldo. Hello, Waldo. Hello, Waldo. Hi, Darla. Hello, gang.
Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, what your name is, and what your connection is to the Our Gang, or some people know as the Little Rascals.
Okay. Hi, I'm David Smith, and I am the second son of four boys. I'm the second son of Darwood Kaye Smith. And Darwood Kaye Smith, his Hollywood name was Darwood Kaye. He played the role of Waldo in the Our Gang comedy series. Some people call it the Little Rascals. So I am the son of Waldo in Our Gang. And anybody who knows these episodes knows that Waldo was the resident nerd. Smooth-faced kid, always wearing a necktie, always prissy, always had his hair combed. He's the only kid who could spell things right. Everybody else had all the S's backward. And so he was the resident nerd and the geek, and was hired to play that role in Our Gang, and he did that for 3 years.
And he was kind of the smart kid of the group.
He was definitely the smart kid of the group. They turned to him if they needed anything written out, if they wanted something spelled right, if they needed a contract. Waldo could do that for them.
And how did your father get into the business?
My mom and my grandma and grandpa lived in Colorado, but they went on a trip, just a road trip to Southern California, checked out Hollywood, kind of were enamored of it. And my grandma just had the idea, maybe I could be a Hollywood mom. I got my little son here. He's a cute little guy. And son of a gun, it just worked out. She just hustled. They walked the streets. They passed out 8x10 glossies. And somehow my dad began to get these little, he was a 6-year-old kid, began to get these little bit parts, little extra jobs. And then just one day they had a casting call for Waldo. And because he had a little bit of a Hollywood resume by then, he went in and they got that part.
And how many years did your father play Waldo?
He was in for about 3 years, and the lucky thing is, Waldo, Dad, he was in Our Gang right during what I would say is the heyday. They had 22 years of Our Gang programming, and he was right toward the end. They had silent movies, and then about 1932, 33, 35, they began to do the talkies. And the lucky thing for Waldo, my dad, was he was in the gang right during the heyday when some of the top people were there. And I always give 4 names, Spanky, Waldo, Darla, Buckwheat. And they were the superstars. They were really good. And somehow my dad, even though he was a bit player, he was shoulder to shoulder with Buckwheat and Alfalfa and those guys. In fact, I'll tell you real quick, it was a running gag on Our Gang that Alfalfa and Waldo were always fighting for Darla. They were always competing who was going to get Darla as the girlfriend in that particular episode. And most of the time, it was Alfalfa. There was one episode where the scriptwriters gave her to my dad, and he rode off with her into the sunset. But I can tell you just very quietly, I can tell you this, in real life, my daddy and Waldo, they were a little bit of an item. They had a little bit of a romantic thing going. Now, they were 8 years old. But Darla and my dad, they were kind of childhood sweethearts way back a million years ago. That's a true story.
Oh, wow.
Which is filmed, I think, in 1939.
Yeah.
And the way he got into that, one of the moms on Our Gang was Hattie McDaniel. And she, African-American lady, and she played, I think she played Buckwheat's mom. One funny thing about Our Gang, they didn't try at all to have continuity. So one kid might have 3 different mothers in 3 different shows. But Buckwheat, Hattie McDaniel played Buckwheat's mom in a few Our Gang episodes. And then when Gone with the Wind came along, they wanted her to play the main slave character in it. She got an Oscar for that. And so a lot of the gang kids are just people hanging around. They all got hired as extras. But I gotta tell you that my dad, even though he was an extra in Gone with the Wind, I've watched the movie real careful, like 3 times. I've not spotted him yet. So if he was in a crowd scene. But he definitely was an extra there and got $5 or whatever they paid. So that's my bragging thing. My dad was in Gone with the Wind along with Scarlett O'Hara.
Wow, that's something.
Yeah, kind of fun.
I mean, you also worked with like Barbara Stanwyck from what I read, and Lucille Ball.
I forgot about that. Let me talk about that. One of my dad's closing moments was in a musical called Best Foot Forward.
Okay.
And he was about 15. That's right when he kind of quit Hollywood, kind of his last thing.
Yeah.
But he played a little role in a movie called Best Foot Forward, which is a really good musical. Okay. Lucille Ball was in it, and it was a Harry James, the great trumpeter, musical. So the whole story is built around a military academy dance where Lucille Ball is kind of a ringer coming in. And there's actually a little romantic moment where she, even though my dad is maybe 4 inches shorter than she is, they have a little walking from here to here, arm in arm kind of a thing. And I have a picture of my dad kind of arm in arm with Lucille Ball walking down the runway or whatever it is. And so that's really the claim to fame, that Dad had a little cinema moment with Lucille Ball. And his character name was Killer. And there's a thing of him playing the tuba, just comically overmatched with his tuba. And again, the killer is tongue-in-cheek, because Dad was still a nerdy, kind of a nebbish-looking guy. And so to call him Killer was very much so over the top. But that was kind of his fun final movie moment, to be in with Lucille Ball.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, fun.
Did your father ever stay in contact with any of the cast members?
There was very little of that for a couple of reasons. First of all, my dad just kind of went into a completely different field, becoming a preacher and then going to do mission work. But when he came back to the States in about 1970, there were just a few moments. There were some Laurel and Hardy reunion events, and I know my dad went to 1 or 2 of those, and there were some of the old cast members there. In fact, we have a picture where Dad and Spanky are standing in a row of guys. And that was a real proud moment for Dad to be able to be kind of shoulder to shoulder with Spanky again after so many years had gone by.
Yeah, because you look online and there's old pictures of some of our gang members with Laurel and Hardy, like on their lap. Another one, like publicity shots, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of that out there. But my dad's connection there was kind of minimal, simply because a lot of people moved on. And this is like 1970, 75, no internet yet. And so there just wasn't a whole lot of that. I will say that for a little brief while there, my dad had a fair number of fan mail and stuff, and he would mail out 8x10 glossies from the Our Gang days to autograph seekers. There was a little bit of that, but not much.
If I'd known about that, I would have tried to get one.
Yeah.
Did your dad ever was into service?
When my dad left Hollywood in 1944, he went to finished high school, started college.
Okay.
I think my dad spent 2 years in the Army, but it was in between any time of conflict. He was over in Korea, but I think it was either just before or just after the Korean War. And so he was strictly there during peacetime operations. So he was in the military, but nothing volatile.
And after that, your father obviously went to college, got married, but your dad got into something else. What did he do?
Well, Dad went to Hollywood High School, which is right down the street from Our Gang and all that. Uh-huh. But somehow he found himself pulled into a Christian life about halfway through high school. So he went to a Christian college nearby in Riverside, right near where I live now, and married a real nice Christian young lady. And he decided to become a minister of the gospel, which is just kind of weird compared to, Hollywood. And even in the Our Gang day, Hollywood was a decadent place. And there was boozing and sleeping around and just a lot of problems, like there always is. But somehow Dad got away from that, became a Christian pastor. And then the kicker is that somehow he and my mom, they were newly married, they got a call to go be mission workers. And so Waldo of our gang, Dad, and I was a little 2-year-old, we ended up out in the boonies of northern Thailand. In fact, so long ago, boonie-wise, they called it Siam back then. And when my dad got the call, literally did not know where, just nearby. My older brother Dan was a pretty influential pastor in the Riverside area, so they enjoyed hanging around with him and hearing him preach and just being around his life of ministry. It got to be 2002, Mom and Dad were retired, and I still remember we had a lovely Mother's Day party. I think it was May 11 or 12 of 2002, and I had a good time together. That was a Sunday, obviously, Mother's Day. And 3 days later, we got a real urgent phone call saying, get over here quick. Dad's been in a hit-and-run accident. Wow. So we jumped in a car. We were over in Thousand Oaks, about an hour away.
Yeah.
And we, about 2 hours away. And so we jumped in a car real quick and sped through LA and got to Riverside Community Hospital to the ICU. But he was hit real bad in a hit and run. Some guy in a pickup truck just went up on the sidewalk. We don't know why, drugs maybe. Went up on the sidewalk and just pounded him and drove off and didn't get caught, didn't get pulled over, nothing. And Dad was hit real bad, and he lingered in the ICU for about 12 hours. But the impact was just too bad, and he died about 8:40 that night.
Oh,
so that was a real tough thing to deal with. And we thought of other our gang people who had violent ends, and this kind of was. But on the other hand, it was a tough, tragic end after 72 years of real good service to the community and working for others, an unselfish life. And so all things considered, as I weigh all that happened, I can look back and say we feel like God gave our family and Dad a wonderful life, despite the jarring end of it. He lived to be 72 and did a lot of good in the world.
And your whole family, like your father, I mean, the rest of you followed to be a pastor, didn't you?
Well, I have my 3 brothers. They all are pastors. I'm not a pastor. I teach math at the local community college here, San Bernardino Valley College. Go Wolverines. But I spent a long time, about 20 years. I was a writer for Christian radio. So I guess the DNA of a pastor is in all of our blood. So I've done some of that too. But we're all very grateful for the heritage of spiritual contributions that Waldo made during those Bangkok years.
And you wrote a book about your father.
I did. I'll always feel bad that I didn't think to do this when he was living. But a few years after he passed away, I just began to think about this colorful story. And even though he was just a bit player, it still is not a small thing to be working with Buckwheat and Alfalfa and Darla and Spanky. And so I said, can I just do enough internet research? And there were a lot of other anthologies around. There's a lot of DVDs around. Can I get enough info here and just kind of compile it and write it up? And I feel like God helped me to do that. And I got a lot of material from Leonard Maltin, who is a film critic, and he wrote a book about our gang. So got a lot of details and just quotes and pithy stuff. And so I spent about 6 months really cranking it out. And so this book is called Finding Waldo, which of course is playing off of Where's Waldo? And there's this classic, wonderful photo, which I'm sure you can show, that shows Darla in the middle and Alfalfa and Dad sitting on 2 sides of her. And she's got one arm around each of them. And of course, like I have mentioned, in real life, Darla was madly in love with my dad. And so when you see that picture, I hope you will keep that in mind. Even though she has an arm around both guys, Dad was always her favorite. But so I had a good time writing that, and it was a fun project for me.
So your off-screen, your dad, Darla's favorite was kind of Dad, and then on-screen it was Alfalfa?
On screen, unfortunately, the script writers usually had Darla riding off into the sunset with Alfalfa because he was the star. But in real life, when they turned off the cameras and the lights, Darla and my dad were just a little romantic tingle between the two of them. And again, bear in mind, they were 8 years old, so I don't think it was a big Hollywood scandal. But Darla and my dad were a little bit boyfriend and girlfriend, sweetie pie, way back when.
Oh, that's cute. How sweet. Well, thank you, David. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure,
I really
too.
appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And can you find the book, Finding Waldo?
It's a Pacific Press publication, but it's on the internet. Amazon has more copies than I wish they did.
Okay.
They're definitely available. And just go to Amazon, Finding Waldo, and it's a fun story.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Thanks.